Alright. Hello and welcome to CHEMS, Careers, Acts, Engineering, Mindset and Stories. Today we have with us Colin Picard, Project Engineer at Clearstone Engineering Limited, who was also my supervisor at the recent oil sands fields campaign. So today we are going to learn more about the work we did in the field and a little bit more about his experiences. Thank you so much, Colin, for accepting my invitation for the interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So maybe you could start with you could tell us more about your education, your work experiences.
Sure. I guess I could start with my work experiences because that started first. So, I guess when I graduated high school, I worked to rebuild a car engine. So that was something that gave me a lot of hands-on skills. Using bolts, nuts. Working with sensors and troubleshooting actually was a big thing that I learned there. After that, I also worked in construction. I worked assembling natural gas pipelines in Calgary. So that was a good experience because it's hard labor, sweaty, long days, the heat. What else? After that, I went traveling. I did spend 1 year working as a park ranger in a park in the south of Chile.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a very beautiful park. So I got experience there with language, personal skills, soft skills, a different realm, of knowledge, I guess, a bit of history. And after that, I came back to Canada, and I started working with Clearstone Engineering as a summer student, similar to what you did this year. I did that for 5 years, through the year before I began university and all through university. I guess save for 1 year where I worked for Dr. Arvind Rahendran in the DAC lab, the director capture. That was where I was working to characterize a primary amine sorbent and to develop a director capture process. We tried with steam, but ultimately that didn't work out. But anyways, that was another good experience of using sensors, checking for leaks, commissioning a system, running different experiments, analyzing the data, interpreting the data. It's all really good experience that I quite enjoyed. And when I graduated, I began slowly supervising some of the campaigns, and now this year was the first year where I supervised both of the oil sands campaigns. And yeah, here we are today.
Okay, so maybe we should talk more about the oil sands fields campaign because not a lot of people, like everyone knows, yeah, the emissions are getting measured. Like they can see the reports, like there's climate change, and we see all that, but not a lot of people know what actually happens. Like basically, not a lot of people know what's fugitive emissions. So like for
Okay.
someone who doesn't know what it is, like what exactly is what we do? Like what exactly are we measuring?
Sure. So the easiest way to think of fugitive emissions is fugitive emissions are non-point source. So when I mean point source, I mean the stack off the back of a turbine, or in your vehicle you have a tailpipe. It's a one single point where the emissions are released. Fugitive emissions are, I mean, the classic example is a pressurized tank that has a leak. That's the most traditional sort of example of a fugitive emission. But fugitive emissions can come from mines. It's not just oil sands mines. So in any kind of mine, whenever you peel back the overburden, the first few, it can be up to 100 meters at least in Alberta for the kind of mining that we do. When you peel that back, you get anything that's in the ground is now being released into the air. So that could be carbon dioxide, that can be methane, that can be water vapor, that can be VOCs, there's so many different compounds that can be released from the ground just by it being exposed to the air, because essentially there's no longer a cap there. So essentially, fugitive emissions are non-point sources. The easiest way to think about it, non-point source emissions.
So like how do we measure these emissions? Like, we usually tell, yeah, we go there and we measure the emissions, but if you had to tell to someone who doesn't know how we do it, like in a very simple way, like how do we actually measure the emissions?
Okay, well, there's a few different methods. The method that we use, or that's currently accepted by the Alberta government, is using the flux chamber isolation method. This method, we essentially take a chamber that has an acrylic dome on it, and we push this into the surface, whether it's an ore surface, or we'll put it onto a tailings pond with an inner tube around it just so it floats. And the idea is that we know the surface area of that chamber that we're placing. We will inject a zero gas, so a gas that's absent of everything that we're measuring. So it's been filtered of all VOCs, it has no or very low methane and carbon dioxide, insignificant amounts. And we measure the air coming out because we inject, and the exhaust from this chamber will combine with the flux of the emissions from the source, the surface, and we measure the concentration coming out. Based on the known flow rate going in, we can say exactly how much the flow rate is going out and how much is actually being released from the ground. And so we can do multiple measurements, and we can take an average of those measurements, and we can apply that over an area, essentially.
So you use different type of sensors, right? So what are some of the sensors or anything we use?
Sure. Okay. So the main sensor that we use, it would be an infrared laser, I guess. So we use infrared spectroscopy. So we carry around infrared spectrometers, and those spectrometers measure carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane. Those are the three primary greenhouse gases that we measure. We also do take sample canisters, and we send those to the lab, which obviously that's a little bit different, but many different compounds get analyzed there as well.
But how important do you think it is to measure these emissions? Is it important? And why? Why do you think it's important?
Okay, well, I would say it's very important to know because, it's impossible to know what kind of objectives you can even meet if you don't know where you are, right? So it's important for both the public and the government to know these numbers. In fact, all the numbers that we actually measured, all the final data, the final emissions, are all publicly available online. You can find that data. So I think it's important for the public to know and for the government to know because this is how we can understand each other and understand what's going on in the land that we're living, in the place that we're living, to better help us to guide ourselves to a future that we want.
So you told about the flux chamber method. Is that the most efficient method to measure the emissions?
Well, okay, so this method is effective depending on the type of source. So on tailings ponds, this is actually quite an effective source, or this is a very effective method, for that type of source. Because we take many measurements on the ponds, and we can actually see hot spots on the ponds. We can actually create heat maps of the pond based on the emissions, right? But a source like ore surfaces, where you have small pathways for gases to be coming through the ground, it's possible to hit what I call a geyser. It's not in the traditional sense of water shooting from the ground, but if you're on a hot spot where there's a larger pathway for maybe the gases from the ground to be migrating to the surface, you can see very high emissions. But that might be that one single spot in that right there. Or if you pick that chamber up and you place it somewhere else, you might not get those same emissions. So it's not nearly as consistent as it is on a pond.
Okay.
So that method has weaknesses with measuring on oil sands, the ore itself.
So you have been to an open pit mine, and we have seen a lot of the emissions. So what are your opinions about the open pit mining, and considering just the emissions part? Since you've been there, you've seen the emissions, you've measured it. So what are your views and opinions?
Okay, well, open pit mining, I know that minerals are obviously very important for human existence. I don't think we would be here. We would be wearing these clothes without oil. I get it. But there are more environmentally friendly ways of extracting at least oil. Not all minerals can be extracted in situ, but oil just happens to be one of those minerals that can be. Now, I know that it's much more energy intensive to do in situ mining or extraction of oil, but it does leave the opportunity to use nuclear power to provide steam to these processes instead of OSTGs, which consume enormous amounts of natural gas.
But when you tell nuclear, it sounds dangerous. So
yes, I know it definitely sounds dangerous. And everybody thinks of Chernobyl and what happened in Japan, but nuclear technology in Canada has been very reliable. I mean, the CANDU reactors speak for themselves, right? And there are also other types of reactors, like small modular reactors that have melt plugs, so that reactors will shut off by themselves without any human intervention in the case of a meltdown. And nuclear power is really, it's not something that can replace feedstock. We still need, materials, and that's where oil comes in, because until we can find alternatives for that, oil is, I don't know how we would make car tires currently without oil. But energy is something that can be easily replaced with nuclear energy. And nuclear energy is much more stable, much more reliable, and much more environmentally friendly. Now, I know there's the consideration of the waste.
Yeah.
But if we consider, the volume and the size of a tailings pond, I mean, there's one tailings pond I know of. Its surface area I measured to be 14.7 square kilometers. And that's the surface area of this entire pond. Now, that same amount of area underground would be many, many, many thousands of years worth of storage of nuclear waste. And nuclear technology is also improving to the point where now there are reactors systems that can be using the waste of other reactors to run them. So it can be kind of it could be a better solution than what we have.
Well, maybe in the future. Maybe.
Hopefully not in the too distant future.
But then, so when I tell people field engineer and they have a different perspective, but since you have been working in the field and you do both, you work in the office and the field. Yes. So if you are to tell someone what it is to actually be a field engineer, for especially the new grads, they just think, oh, field engineer is just working in the field. But what exactly it is to be a field engineer?
Well, first thing I would say is pretty hard. It is. It's not easy. I mean, I can. It's early mornings, late nights, here in coveralls, work boots, hard hat, safety gloves, all the safety gear all day long. It can be very hot and sweaty and, hard and arduous. But there are also some really good things about it. It's a really good learning experience. It's cool to see, the plants and getting right inside and seeing all the all the different processes that are going on, or the vehicles that are driving around, or things like that. But if I had a piece of advice for somebody who wanted to become a field engineer, the first thing I would say is it's kind of like whether you want to choose business over family, you have to be very careful with being a field engineer, because it can have a significant toll on your personal life if you are not prepared for it. That's something that is something to be mindful of. And secondly, I would say obviously be willing to work long hours. I mean, it's just the nature of the game.
Yeah.
And be able to use things like a wrench. Getting experience changing the oil on your car. Something as simple as that is, because to be a field engineer, you have to be dynamic and you have to be flexible and you have to be. It takes all the knowledge of everything that you have to apply to that job. It's not just what you learn in the classroom about mass transfer or things like that. It requires some more manual skills that if you can't do, the whole thing can't come together. So so I'd say family, be prepared to work hard, and knowing how to use your hands for things.
So would you prefer to be a field engineer or work in the office?
I mean, to start my career off, I think definitely is important to me to work in the field, because that's where you get very interesting experiences. Measuring turbines, or reboilers, or going to different countries to do work for exotic clients, or being a field supervisor for a team.
Yeah.
So being a field engineer is it's a very good experience. It's very hard, I would say, but I would not have done it otherwise. I think it's very important to learn those skills, because that's what gives you value once you get to the office. Because I do eventually want to move more towards office work, but in order to get there, I need the perspective of the guys in the field, guys in the ground who are working, or I should say people on the ground, people who are working, and there's always the typical complaint about engineers not understanding the problem, and the people in the field on the ground, they're like, this is not a reasonable solution. It's very clear and obvious in the field, but in an office, it's not. There's that disconnect. So getting that field experience is very valuable, because that makes you an engineer that will not create those ridiculous solutions to problems that just needed something very simple.
Makes sense. So like, if you had to explain what a typical day in the field looks like from morning till evening, based on the work we do, like what would you, like, how do you explain it?
Okay, so I mean,
Like for someone who's like, what do you people actually do? Like, is it tough? Yeah, it's tough, but what exactly it is?
Okay, so first thing would be waking up early. So depending on who you are, some people wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. I wake up a little bit later than that, but 5:30, wake up. Another you're leaving by 5 a.m. or 5:30, maybe 6 a.m. if it's a later day. You get to site and you set up and you start measuring all day long, and you'll be measuring until you're on site for 12 hours. Or just before that, and you come off site, you ship your samples, all the canister samples that we take, and then you would go back to camp, and sometimes you'd be getting back to camp at 6:37, sometimes even later, 8 o'clock maybe. It's quite a bit of work. Yeah, it's.
But then if there's any one technical skill, like, so if there's one technical skill you have to learn to be a field engineer, what would that be? Or even like, it could be one technical skill or one just like, a soft skill. What should it be?
Okay, a technical skill is in terms of like an academic skill,
or it could be anything. Like if you think like being for someone who wants to be a field engineer, like this skill is non-negotiable. Like like that person has to have it.
I mean, the ability to troubleshoot, I think, would be probably. I guess it's not necessarily a technical skill, because I mean anybody can do it, but it's a very important skill, because being able to just you're not always going to have somebody who can be there to help you, and so even though if you don't understand something, you can use what you know to troubleshoot. Creating a change to the system, seeing the response. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, create this change and see the response, and just following with that type of methodical approach is something that is very helpful, because it's important to ask questions when you don't know, but there's also a point where you could be asking, not that always ask questions, but when you start asking too many questions, it can be hard for your team. And it's troubleshooting, I would say, is probably number one, I would say, as a field engineer. And the second skill I'd say is understanding what you studied. So for example, I studied chemical engineering, so understanding why certain vessels are insulated, why others are not, why the location of certain buildings, and how they, like, what machinery is inside, and just understanding how things work based on your knowledge of engineering. That also helps quite a bit, because that can also help you troubleshoot. If you're because let's say your apparatus is all working properly, but your readings are off and something's up. You don't know. You check all your analyzers, your computers, everything's working properly, but you're just getting weird readings. You can look around and see and talk to the people on site. What's going on with this? Was this down earlier? Is this having issues? Is there? You can ask so many different questions that might point to a problem that is not with your equipment, but that is still within the whole measurement system, right? That of what's going on. So that's where your engineering knowledge really comes in, being able to understand what is actually physically going on that you're measuring. It's not just your measuring system. It's what you're actually measuring that's important, really. So using your engineering knowledge for that, I would say, is very important.
Makes sense, especially for the new grads nowadays. They're just graduating, and I know the competition is huge. So like, what would be like one piece of advice, since you also been there, like a few years back? So like, what would be like one piece of advice, since you've worked in the field, you worked in the office, you've been out there? So like, what would be like one piece of advice you would like to give to them?
That's kind of a hard one.
Like, it could be like anything, like, especially I know a lot of them are obviously looking for jobs, so it could be related to that, or something which could help them stand out in this competitive world, like the competitive Canadian market?
I mean, when I'm hiring somebody,
Mm-hmm.
I want to see somebody who is actually interested in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I get there's the whole fake it till you make it motto. I get it, but if you're truly interested in what that company is doing, you're going to learn so much faster, and that's also something that I would be looking for in somebody. Because certain skills you can learn. If somebody's not a complete package, but they're very interested and they know all about the company I work for and they know the work that we do,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the skills they're trying to get are exactly the skills that we offer. I would consider hiring that person because if you're interested, you'll pick things up quicker. And they might even find out and have more visionary ideas
Mm-hmm.
about something that you didn't see before, just because they're interested in and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking about it all the time in their time off even. So I would say try to shoot for something that you actually enjoy as much as you can, because I understand everybody has to eat and needs to find a job,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes you have to make choices to survive rather than for doing something that you like. But I would say if you can, definitely focus on doing something that you like in a field that you believe in, something that gives you purpose. Because for me, I believe in environmental work.
Mm-hmm.
Is something that gives me purpose. So um, it helps me to get out of the bed in the morning, because it's something that I can feel that I'm doing my part for a better world by doing this work. So something a bit more profound, I would say, is what to me would make anybody stand out more than just looking for a job and having a good resume. Because I mean, nowadays even cover letters are written by ChatGPT, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, resumes have less weight now because of that. Now it comes down more to like interviews, and I mean personally, I'm actually going to be doing interviews in person from now on, just because ChatGPT has such a serious influence on hiring now. Because I need to know if people can actually, can you drive? Can you use a wrench? Can you solve this math problem? Can you understand this, chemical engineering concept? I need to know these skills on the fly, not like see somebody reading out. I need to see some real skills.
Makes sense.
And just being honest about it, I guess, because using an AI is not representing your skills. It's representing some program skills, I guess.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's all I had for you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much for